All right, hello, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. So welcome to the session on using Microsoft 365 to secure your remote workforce. I should be sharing my screen, so if somebody could remark in the comments and see if you're able to see my screen yet. Great, okay. Looks like it's out there. Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to get started here. There's going to be plenty of time for questions at the end here. This is not a super long presentation. So just for anyone who needs an overview of PSM Partners, give you an idea who we are. So we're a technology firm founded in 2014 here in the Chicagoland. We are focused heavily on small businesses and the mid-market. And we've had rapid, steady growth over the last few years. We're now at over 200 clients. We have a very strong Microsoft relationship. We've been debt-free and cash flow positive since month 4. And we're very focused on our client relationships, very focused on our culture. So just personally, I just have to say I've joined PSM Partners in November of last year. And I think one of the things that's really refreshing about working here is just how direct and honest we are with our customers. And I think integrity is just a huge win in my book. So that's the thing that's really stood out about this firm for me. So just a quick overview of some of our credentials in terms of the Microsoft space. So in terms of our Microsoft practice, we are very heavily focused on data center transformation. We're very focused on Microsoft 365. So, I'd say a big part of what we're focused on is helping our customers embrace the cloud, helping them move away from on-premise legacy systems and just simplify their environments to make them easier to manage. There are a couple success stories listed here. I'm not going to go into them, but you can see some areas where we've actually successfully deployed Microsoft 365. So, in talking about Microsoft 365 for security, I think it's important to talk a little bit about the security landscape that we currently live in. So here are some threats that exist today for small and medium-sized businesses. 71% of cyber attacks attack small businesses. So that's important to think about. I think a lot of people think about the larger companies when they get hacked because it makes headline news. You don't always hear about it when small businesses are actually attacked. 55,000 devices are compromised by ransomware every month. That is mind-boggling. It's just amazing to me. And then 60% of small businesses close their doors after a cyber attack. And maybe the worst statistic on this list, $900K is the average cyber attack remediation cost for small businesses. And why are these attacks successful? So I think to summarize, the attacks on security have gotten so much more sophisticated. I think that's the biggest thing that's changed is the hackers are just so much more informed, so much more sophisticated than they used to be. And so so these are some important statistics there. 30% of users open emails from attackers and 10% click on attachments or links. And a lot of times those attachments, of course, can contain a payload that is ransomware. And this is not just your beginners, right? This isn't people that are new to using a computer. These are very experienced tech-savvy users that will occasionally click on these phishing attempts because they look so legitimate. If they get through, they look very, very impressively real. And 63% of passwords are weak, default or stolen. That's something we can address in a few different ways with biometrics and multi-factor authentication. And then 53% of users accidentally share information. So I think the important thing to think about in terms of security is you really only need one weak point. If your passwords are all strong, but yet somehow information is being shared outside the organization that's not appropriate, well, it doesn't matter how strong the passwords are. Or if someone is able to get in to access your systems, it doesn't really matter if you've got great disk encryption, because if they're able to get in, they're going to find all the data anyway. So then in talking about Microsoft 365 and security, I think it's important to step back and actually define what Microsoft 365 is, because there's a lot of confusion about that right now. One of the things that's most confusing about it, Microsoft kind of brought upon themselves. They decided to rebrand Office 365 as Microsoft 365, even though the Microsoft 365 brand previously existed. So, so I figured it would be important to summarize what we're talking about here. And if you had me, if you and I were on an elevator and the elevator was in motion, I only had a couple floors before I had to get off. Here's how I would summarize what Microsoft 365 is for you. So it's a subscription-based set of services. It's composed of cloud-based services. It's composed of collaboration and productivity applications. It includes endpoint management. So that includes any kind of endpoint from your mobile device to your PC, you name it. And it includes security technologies. So that's, in a nutshell, what Microsoft 365 is. It is subscription-based model. As with a lot of subscription-based models, it's highly customizable. So you can customize the Microsoft 365 subscription, and there are literally dozens of configurations based on your individual needs. And so you can get the subscription that makes the most sense and is the most sense financially for your business. So I'm going to talk through what the components of Microsoft 365 are. And as I talk through them, I'm going to talk through some of the security aspects we can address here. So if we're looking at Microsoft 365, or if we're looking at your computing environment in general, what I've done here is I've sort of split things into the back end of the front end. So the left side of the screen is all the stuff that takes place behind the scenes that enables us to get to this data, enables us to use all these incredible mobile devices that we use, and to use these applications to share information and collaborate and hopefully get our work done. That's all stuff that happens behind the scenes, but it's all super important. A lot of it has to do with security and authentication, but also the management of the devices. So those are that's the left side of the screen. And then the right side of the screen is where most of us live on a day-to-day basis. So the right side of the screen is the productivity solutions, the applications we use, things like Microsoft Teams, which is a great productivity and collaboration application. So you can see that there's sort of a journey here. You know, we access these systems on the left side. Our devices are managed. Then we actually collaborate and hopefully get some work done. And in some cases, we actually have to share information outside the organization, which is just part of business. We just make sure that we're doing that in a secure way. So all of these points that you see on here, these all exist in any business. They're not all handled the same way. Some businesses are more rigorous about some of these aspects than others, but in reality, we all have pretty much all of these systems exist in some form in every business. And if you look at the landscape that's out there, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of applications that address all these individual points. And so we've listed some of them here, and the applications that are listed here they're all viable products, right? These are viable products and platforms from viable software vendors. What Microsoft 365 does is it enables you to replace many of these applications with a consolidated solution. And so that's not to say that the other solutions out there are bad. And in some cases, you may decide to keep some of the solutions that you have in place. But when you figure price into the equation, when you look at price and you look at the amount of money that you're spending, and you also look at the complexity of managing applications and platforms from different vendors, the Microsoft 365 value proposition, a lot of it is about simplicity. So first of all, if you're talking about the Microsoft 365 story, we have to talk about what's called EMS, or Enterprise Mobility and Security. Now, the EMS suite has been around for several years now. It has several different components to it. I'm not going to try to go into all of them here, but I'm going to hit a few of the high points. So Azure Active Directory, that's your identity in the cloud. There are solutions built into Azure Active Directory that allow a single sign-on situation with your on-premises AD. If you have on-premises Active Directory, it allows you to have username and password synchronization across. So you don't have to remember multiple passwords to get into the cloud, and that synchronizes across all your applications. The Microsoft Threat Protection or Advanced Threat Protection suite exists on multiple platforms. It's part of the EMS suite as well. It can protect mobile devices. It can protect any kind of endpoint. Also, there's a flavor of Advanced Threat Protection that also protects email as well. Intune is Microsoft's mobility solution that allows you to manage any type of device. When people think of mobile device management, they typically think of phones and tablets, but the reality is Intune can manage PCs as well. So you can manage all of your devices with Microsoft Intune. And then Azure Information Protection is a pretty sophisticated set of tools that allows you to control information as it's exiting the company. So when people are emailing other recipients outside your organization, and it enables you to have control and make sure that information is being shared safely. So then moving forward with the from EMS into the rest of the Microsoft 365 suite. So I'd be remiss in talking about Microsoft 365 if I didn't mention Windows 10. So Microsoft 365 has been designed to hook into Windows 10 from the ground up. So if you look at the features that are built into Windows 10, and Windows 10 is now, really established operating system. It's been out for several years now. I think we're going on like 6-7 years that it's been out, and it's a very stable operating system. As the Windows 10 platform has evolved and improved, Microsoft has continued to focus on security. The security focus has just increased over the last 10 years in a major way, and so a lot of these features help with keeping Windows 10 secure, keeping your data secure, and so I'm not going to go into all these, but those are some of the aspects of Windows 10 that figure into the equation. So then, if you look at the right side of basically the right side of this is where all the applications that you use on a daily basis that are productivity based. And I could go into an entire separate seminar talking about Microsoft 365 and productivity. We could talk about Teams, we could talk about SharePoint, and of course the traditional Office suite that we know, but now the way that you can collaborate with those applications in the cloud. I'm not going to go into all that since we're kind of focused on security today, but that's all part of the Microsoft 365 picture. So Microsoft's security platform has come a long, long way. Some of you who've been around in the business as long as I have remember that Microsoft had a few black eyes back in the 90s. We've come a long way since then. So Gartner Group actually rates Microsoft as a leader in several areas. I've gone through a lot of the reports. Unfortunately, I don't have the rights to actually share those reports with you today. But Microsoft is rated as a leader in access management, endpoint protection platforms, unified endpoint management tools. That's just a few of the areas where Microsoft is rated in a leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant. So they truly have established themselves as a leader in the security space. And I think that when you're talking about security and you're talking about cloud-based services, I think it's important to highlight how the conversation has changed, because I remember a lot of conversations I used to have with people years ago where they'd say, I just don't want to move to the cloud because I'm worried about the security. And now I'm having the opposite conversation, right? Because now the conversation that I'm having with a lot of customers and prospects is, I want my data to be more secure. I want to not have that responsibility of having to manage all the different aspects of making sure that my data is secure if it's in my data center, physical security, at-rest encryption, all those complexities that I need to manage that I can have Microsoft manage for me. So talking about security, we also have to talk about compliance. So the Microsoft 365 platform has a really long list of certifications. And in fact, Microsoft is leading compared to its peers in terms of the number of different standards and regulatory bodies that have marked it as approved. GDPR is a pretty important one. That may not actually affect your business if you're not doing business with customers that are overseas, but it's a pretty rigorous set of requirements, and Microsoft passed that long ago. So some of you may have customers or work with customers in the federal government. There's another complicated set of requirements there, depending on which branch of the federal government you're working with. So Microsoft is ready for you there too. So I've kind of given an overview of Microsoft 365. I've talked about why Microsoft 365 is viable as a security platform. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the offerings that we have at PSM Partners. Now, one thing I didn't share at the beginning of our presentation is just, I usually state this and I didn't today, but PSM Partners, we basically have three divisions to our business. So we have the solutions integration team, that's the team I'm in charge of, and that's our IT consulting practice. Then we have a managed services team, and my colleague Frank Anderson is actually also on the call today. He actually leads that team. We have a third team that actually handles technology staffing and recruiting. So that's kind of an unusual combination. We can actually help you with finding the technology experts you need to help you run your business. So in stating all that, I'm going to talk a little bit about some offerings that we have specifically to Microsoft 365 and security. And in the SI practice, we have a Microsoft Identity and Security Assessment that we've launched. So in terms of the Microsoft Identity and Security Assessment, in terms of just defining the offering, it's a customized assessment of Microsoft 365 and Active Directory, wherever you are in the deployment process. If you've just started, you're just thinking about getting started, or if you've deployed all the workloads that you could in Microsoft 365 and you want us to come and have a look, we'll meet you wherever you are. It utilizes some of the technologies that are built into Microsoft 365. If you've been researching Microsoft 365, you may have heard of Microsoft's Secure Score technology. The Secure Score technology helps you rate your organization. So that's one of the technologies we incorporate into the identity and security assessment. It also incorporates some proprietary automation we developed within PSM, and we use some other best-of-breed solutions to assess the environment as we go through. We provide deployment and remediation recommendations. In some cases, you may have other solutions that are in place that may duplicate with Microsoft 365. In some cases, it makes sense to keep those solutions in place. It doesn't always make sense to replace what you have. So we'll assess what you have and where you are. And it's customized for your environment based on your business needs and based on your current configuration. So what's included? It's a 1 to 2 day workshop. There's an identity and security assessment report that's produced at the end. There's a gap analysis and recommendations, and then we close it out with a summary presentation. And I mentioned earlier that we have a managed services team that's led by Frank Anderson. Frank is on the call, and I wanted to invite Frank to talk a little bit about our managed security offering next. So Frank, if you're on, jump in at any point. I'm going to pull up the slide for you. Okay, I'm not hearing from Frank, so I'm going to go ahead and walk through this. So our managed security offering is for our managed services customers. So it's an ongoing offering. It does leverage Microsoft 365. As you can see, it actually leverages several other vendors as well. So the thing that's really cool about our managed security offering, in my view, is the fact that we also use the Microsoft Secure Score for that offering as well. So the offerings are aligned, and if you end up becoming a managed services customer of PSM, we can actually monitor and manage your environment on an ongoing basis. So we actually have a security operations center that operates 24/7 and will monitor your environment. And you can see some of the technologies, some of the vendors we have partnered with here. So that's all I had in terms of slides. What I'd like to do is I'd like to open this up to questions that you may have about Microsoft 365 or about security. So one question is, how does Intune help people manage personal mobile devices? So that's a great question. So Intune does manage any of the major mobile device platforms that are out there. It can actually it's comprehensive, so it can support being able to encrypt your data, being able to compartmentalize the data so that it can be you can actually do a wipe just of the company data instead of having to wipe the entire device. All of the things that you would typically expect in terms of mobile device management. So the thing that's been really noteworthy as far as Intune goes is some organizations have found that they don't need a larger and more complex management platform, including Microsoft's own SCCM, which is still out there and is still a viable platform. But a lot of companies have found that SCCM isn't even needed anymore because they can use it to manage PCs as well. There also is a technology that is available from Microsoft called Autopilot that allows you to automatically deploy PCs. And you manage that through Intune, and it makes the process of deploying, for example, right now in the current climate, when you're deploying laptops, you can ship laptops to people without having to preload the software because that all gets taken care of once they power on the device. What other questions does anyone have? That's great. So great question here. So with the current situation and nearly the entire work population is working from home, what are top considerations we should think about for security at home? So one thing that I appreciate you bringing that up. So one thing that is super critical is making sure that your home environment, that if you have people in home environments, that they actually have at least a consumer grade firewall connected to their network, and that they've applied all the latest updates. And one thing we've done at PSM is for our managed services customers, when things kind of got a little bit crazy with COVID-19 in March, we extended our support services to all remote users within the organizations we were already supporting because we knew we needed to support them anyway. But to further answer your question, other things you need to think about. So for the device, for the remote users that are connecting to your network, if they're actually connecting and they're accessing the LAN, then you need to have a really good secure solution there as far as a VPN or clientless VPN. Those are solutions we work with all the time. We can help you with. The other thing to think about is drive encryption for mobile devices. All the mobile devices should have drive encryption enabled using Microsoft's BitLocker is one, that's one solution. That's not the only solution out there, but using some kind of drive encryption is super important. So really you need to make sure that, I guess to summarize, you need to make sure you have firewall protection. You may need to make sure that the traffic is encrypted, that all the internet traffic is encrypted from the device. And then you really should have drive encryption on the device itself. So let's see some other questions. So if we have assets in the cloud, Azure, does Microsoft 365 offer any protection there? So there's a whole separate set of security offerings pertaining to Azure, which I won't try to go into, but they are very closely aligned with the Microsoft 365 suite. And the secure mode of authentication that you use for Microsoft 365 seamlessly operates in your Azure environment as well. So that's kind of a separate discussion if you want to talk about Azure security. But there's several things out there from Microsoft there, and we could go into that in a separate conversation if you'd like. Let's see if I got any other questions here. So one other thing that came up, another question someone was asking me just prior to this meeting that I thought I would bring up is just, what are the things that you need to think about in terms of having a remote user population that's regularly accessing your corporate environment. And I think one thing is just to make sure that you're thinking about things like multi-factor authentication, and that you're looking at some sort of tool to analyze the data. So one example of that is advanced threat analytics. That's one of the components of Microsoft 365. So, so a scenario there would be, let's say that there's a computer that signs onto the network, and it connects. Maybe I'm connected to a VPN, which we don't use a VPN at PSM, but let's just say I was connected to one, right? All the security looks great. It's got my username. It's got my password. It authenticates. Then I disconnect, and then I connect later, supposedly, right? But then that connection point that's 10 minutes later is coming from an IP address that's in China. So advanced threat analytics would actually detect that and say, wow, okay, this isn't possible. This is an impossible travel scenario. So this probably isn't a legitimate connection request. One of these isn't. And so it would actually either shut off my account, or you can configure it as far as what the reaction would be there. So that's another thing to think about is, are you analyzing the way your environment is being accessed remotely? Okay, so another good question. If you're not going to roll out all the Microsoft 365 services, but you had to recommend one service as a starting point related to security. So so I don't know much about your environment, so I can't really completely assess your situation. But one thing that a lot of companies have started with is multi-factor authentication, because multi-factor authentication actually works seamlessly with the Microsoft 365 suite. It's really easy to deploy. A lot of people, when they think about MFA, they think it's going to be really difficult, and you're going to have people carrying around hardware devices and that kind of thing. And it's come a long way if you've used MFA solutions in the past. So I'd say that's multi-factor authentication is a lot of times a good place to start. Okay, so we're up against our time here because we booked this for a half an hour. Oh, okay. Is there a recommended type of MFA? Authenticator app, SMS, biometrics. So, so I will actually go into that. So Microsoft's MFA platform does use the authenticator. It can use an authenticator app. It can use SMS. It can use a call. Really, the most important thing is that you pick a solution that is going to actually be appropriate for your user population. What I've seen in different organizations is that different user populations respond better to different methods. Some people really like the SMS, some people hate SMS. So I think it's important to pick one or more authentication methods that are actually going to befit your environment. I think that's the most important thing. But I think if you've got some form of MFA deployed, even non-Microsoft MFA platforms, I think the most important thing is just to make sure that you've deployed it properly. It's deployed to everyone, that everyone is using it, and then all those other standard security things, like making sure that any systems administrators have separate accounts that they use for sysadmin tasks, that they're not using their day-to-day account, that they check email with to manage the system. So, so we're 12:32 now. I think we're going to wrap up. So we're going to, we'll actually be in touch. We'll send you a follow-up email. If you've got any questions and you'd like to talk to us about anything we talked about today, please reach out to us. So Brian Zoberman's coordinating this event, and he can get you in touch with whomever you'd like to speak to within PSM. So thank you very much for your time. I hope everyone continues to stay safe. So I hope your families are safe and healthy, and I wish you the best.